So how did this hidden waiting room of departed spirits end up as an inescapable agonizing death camp? To get to that point, two more completely separate concepts were rolled together. The first is a place called Gehenna, the Valley of Hinnom. Unlike the others, the Hinnom Valley is a real physical place located on the southern boundary of Jerusalem. Today there's roads and restaurants and people live there. Previous to the arrival of Joshua, though, the indigenous tribe of Ammonites had used this valley for a particularly gruesome ritual. They worshipped the fertility god Molech. In the Hinnom Valley, the Ammonites had a bronze statue of him, a calf's head on a human body with outstretched arms. During the ritual, the hollow statue was filled with fire until the whole thing glowed. The worship of Molech involved placing live children onto the arms of the statue, from where they would fall into the fire and then be burned alive. Lovely, isn't it? So in Leviticus, God explicitly says, "Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. Any Israelite who gives any of his children to Molech must be put to death." But they did anyway. So in 2 Chronicles, we read, Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and sacrificed his sons in the fire, following the detestable ways of the nations the Lord had driven out. Consequently, God expresses his horror at this through the prophets Ezekiel and Jeremiah. We read, Samaria and Jerusalem committed adultery with their idols. They even sacrificed their children whom they bore. They have built the high places to burn their sons in the fire as offerings, something I did not command or mention, nor did it enter my mind. They built high places in the valley of Ben Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Molech, though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind that they should do such a detestable thing. So God removed his protection from Israel. He instructed Jeremiah to warn people about the fall of Jerusalem, saying, "Beware, people will no longer call this place the Valley of Ben Hinnom, but the Valley of Slaughter. I will make them fall by the sword before their enemies." And sure enough, history tells us the city inhabitants were slaughtered in 70 AD, and it's quite probable their bodies were thrown into the Gehenna Valley, the Valley of Hinnom. All the Bible references to Hinnom Valley are to that real physical location. Jesus refers to it in the Sermon on the Mount, and while talking to his disciples, and while talking to the Pharisees. James refers to it in his letter to the 12 tribes of Israel. Note the hearers are Jews who associate Hinnom Valley with God's disgust at burning children. There is no reference to Gehenna in Acts or in Paul's letters or in Revelation, but maybe by Jesus' time it had become a metaphor, rather like we might refer to coming to a sticky end. But note, God specifically disclaims all notions of burning children in fire, in Gehenna, in the Hinnom Valley. So there's no justification for translating the actual physical place, Hinnom Valley, as hell, which is what modern translations do. When encouraging his disciples not to be afraid of opposition, Jesus said, "Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in the valley of Hinnom." And that at least means that God has the power to destroy us partially or totally. So the translators have jammed together the separate locations of Hades, Gehenna, Tartarus and Sheol into one all-encompassing hell. It may make it an easier read, but it does nothing for the original meaning. The idea of hell as unending torture derives from one more place. That is Revelation's lake of fire. Chapter 21 verse 8 says, "The cowardly, the unbelieving, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulphur." It's ironic that preachers have always tried to use hellfire to frighten people into the church. Yet this verse says the fiery lake is the right place for the cowardly. But Revelation also says death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. So Hades and the lake of fire cannot both be hell. Hell gets thrown into hell. That's nonsense. And it begs the question, does it really burn forever? Revelation 14:10 says, "The smoke of their torment will rise for ever and ever."